When all the leaders of the Tower of Shechem heard of it, they entered the stronghold of the house of El-Berith. Abimelech was told that all the leaders of the Tower of Shechem were gathered together. And Abimelech went up to the Mount Zalmon, he and all the people who were with him, and Abimelech took an axe in his hand and cut down a bundle of brushwood and took it up and laid it on his shoulder. And he said to the men who were with him, "What you have seen me do, hurry and do as I have done." So every one of the people cut down his bundle, and following Abimelech, put it against the stronghold, and they set the stronghold on fire over them, so that all the people of the Tower of Shechem also died, about 1,000 men and women. The people head straight to the Tower of Shechem, not trusting its strength, but rather looking to put themselves under the protection of their idol. But as we've seen before, when you place your trust and your hope in anything other than God, it will become a snare to you, and your destruction will not be far behind. We see that Abimelech tells the guys, "Do as I do." Now in chapter 7, verse 17, Gideon also told his men this same thing. He took the jars and they took trumpets. And he said, "When I blow this trumpet, you blow the trumpet, smash the jars, the lights will come out. I know it doesn't make any sense. Just do what I do. Watch how I do it, and then you do that." Well, Abimelech is taking this same approach. He's concocted this crazy idea to burn the tower down. And he tells his guys, just go do what I do. Follow me. Now remember, these are the guys, worthless, reckless, scum of the earth. They don't care about anybody but their own advancement. Now let's look at the message that Jotham gave to the people, how all of it is now coming back around. In verse 15, in verse 20, in verse 48, later on we see in verse 52, but we're not quite there yet. All of it is coming back to what Jotham said in the end of verse 15. If you want to just do a quick flip back, it says, "Let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon." That is what's happening now. Abimelech is the bramble, and fire is now about to come out of him. And the cedars of Lebanon, the people of Shechem, are about to be destroyed by fire from Abimelech. Now, those people who are in this tower are probably not even connected with Gaal and wanting to overthrow Abimelech. They're actually just caught in the middle. And 1,000 men and women die in this tower. They have no connection to the tension that has been building between Abimelech and the men of Shechem. They're just caught in the middle, innocent bystanders, running to the tower of their God to protect them, which we see it doesn't. Verse 50, "Then Abimelech went to Thebez and encamped against Thebez and captured it. But there was a strong tower within that city, and all the men and women and all the leaders of that city fled to it and shut themselves in. And they went up to the roof of the tower." Abimelech here is driving all the people to this tower. He's burned down one tower and he's killed 1,000 men and women. And now he thinks, that worked last time, I'm going to do that again. So he gets all of his men. He drives this other city, Thebez, into their tower because he thinks, I'm going to burn them down too. Verse 52, "And Abimelech came to the tower and fought against it and drew near to the door of the tower to burn it with fire." Remember what Jotham said. There's going to be fire coming out of that bramble bush. You better be careful. He thinks he can burn this one down like he just did. Or at least he's going to try to burn the door down to rush in and kill all the people in there. Let's keep reading in verse 53. "And a certain woman threw an upper millstone on Abimelech's head and crushed his skull." She's looking out the window. She sees him standing right underneath her window. A couple stories up, she gets a millstone, heavy, heavy, heavy. Probably took all of her strength and maybe someone else to help her. She shoves it out the window. It lands and it crushes his skull. Now let's look and see what happens here. At any point, Abimelech could have turned around and changed his way, but he didn't. And eventually he had a millstone dropped on his skull that brought his death. Evil will continue to follow sinners, and sometimes that very evil will overtake them when they feel secure and triumphant. Abimelech is feeling pretty good right now. He's just destroyed the Tower of Shechem and killed 1,000 men and women. Now he's moved on to the Tower of Thebez, where he's lighting the whole place on fire. He's going to burn it to the ground. But he's stopped by a woman who throws a millstone out her window and it crushes his skull. Doesn't kill him yet. Thebez was not as great a city as Shechem, so Abimelech probably assumed, I can burn this one down, no problem. burn the greater tower down, I can burn this tower down. But again, we see here, as we've seen throughout all of Scripture, that God often uses the very small, seemingly insignificant people and situations, such as a woman looking out her window who had a millstone next to her. He uses those little things to confuse and confound and crush the mighty. Let's finish reading verses 54 through 57. Then he called quickly to the young man, his armor-bearer, and he said to him, "Draw your sword and kill me, lest they say of me, a woman killed me." And his young man thrust him through, and he died. And when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, everyone departed to his home. Thus God returned the evil of Abimelech, which he committed against his father in killing his 70 brothers. And God also made all the evil of the men of Shechem return on their heads. And upon them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal. The curse of Jotham is what he had predicted would happen. At the end of his exhortation to the men of Shechem, Jotham says in verse 20, "But if not, let fire come out from Abimelech and devour the leaders of Shechem and Beth Millo, and then let fire come out of the leaders of Shechem and from Beth Millo and devour Abimelech." It's exactly what is happening right here, the end of chapter 9. They've turned on each other. They're killing each other. Now Abimelech is about to die, and before his death, he calls his servant over and tells him, "You kill me, because I don't want anybody to write down that a woman killed me. So please, you do it. You kill me right now." His last words were not to God. His last words were for his servant to kill him. Number one, so that no man could say that a woman killed him. His pride was so great that he would rather die by the hand of his servant than die by the hand of a woman. That is pride at its highest, fueling him to his very last breath. And now the second thing I want us to notice is that he didn't call out to God in his very last breath. God might have had mercy on him if he would have repented in this moment. I don't know how God does it, but he sees the heart. If Abimelech's heart had been changed in his last few minutes of his life, he could have been saved. But he decided to use his last breath to ask his servant to kill him and to not turn to God. And all throughout chapter 9, we have seen his true character by the people that he has enlisted to work for him, by the choices that he made to kill his 70 brothers, to burn down the Tower of Shechem with innocent people in there. And now we see his true heart. It's so full of pride and hate and anger. He can't even call out to God in his last dying minute. Now, as we close off this chapter, I want us to notice 3 things about his death. It's going to kind of tie everything in this chapter together. The first thing to notice is that he was killed with 1 stone. Now, if we want to look back to verse 5, it says, "And he went to his father's house at Ophrah and killed his brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal, 70 men on 1 stone." The connection there is very clear. God brings everything back around, doesn't he? Now, the second thing to notice about his death is that his skull was crushed. The head on which he wanted to wear that crown was crushed. He wanted the title of king so bad that he could think of nothing else. Even in his last dying breath, he could only think of how his title could be preserved as king who didn't die by the hand of a woman, as if nobody else saw this happening. But his skull was crushed. He would never wear that title. He would never wear that kind of crown again. This was the end of the line for Abimelech and his pride. Now, the third thing to notice about his death, we've already mentioned this before, but the stone was dropped by a woman. Now, God often uses the small, seemingly insignificant things to confound and to confuse and to ultimately crush the mighty. And that's what happened to Abimelech here. And everything will be done for God's glory. God will allow this evil to continue until it ruins them. Why does he do that? He does it because they never gave the evil up. They kept pushing for more. They kept pursuing for more. They kept running after things that were not part of God's plan. And God finally says, whatever is in your heart, you're going to run after that. I can't stop you. I'm trying to give you all my goodness. But you don't want it. You reject it over and over. And so now you're going to have your fill, and it's going to lead to your ruin. He said that to Abimelech. He says it to us today. If we hear the word today and we don't accept it, the Bible says it's going to be too late. Right now, we have a chance, while we are still living and breathing on this earth, to hear the gospel message of how Jesus saves. And we can turn it around. We can make it right. No matter what we've done, we can turn it around. Abimelech could have turned it around. He could have put away all the evil in his heart. He knew God. His father Gideon knew God. He knew there was a different way than the way he had been doing his life. But he didn't. And this is what led to his ruin and ultimately his death. This story reminds us that when we don't put God first and when we don't guard the condition of our heart, we are on a slippery slope that leads us ultimately to our ruin. May we be so careful to follow behind God so closely. When he moves to the left, even if it's just a slight degree, we're moving to the left with him. He moves to the right, just even an inch, we're moving to the right, just an inch. We're following behind God. No matter what, we follow Jesus to the very